I think there can be a snowball effect where maybe it's a wake-up call for other guys. I guess I've heard that Titus Howard is upset. He's talking on Instagram about being upset. That's fine. But if Titus Howard really wants to be like Laremy Tunsil, go be like Laremy Tunsil now. Come into camp in shape, handle your business, and figure your stuff out. That's what Laremy Tunsil needs to do. But not everyone can move like that. And I'm really, really proud of this front office for making this move. Because I think now this kind of shows that you really do believe that iron sharpens iron. You really do believe in Swarm. Because Laremy Tunsil is a damn good football player. He's damn sure not Swarm. He's damn sure not Swarm. I don't even think he would claim to be Swarm. I can see him laughing now. Hell no, I'm not Swarm. You heard DeMeco Ryans the other day say what he wanted from an offensive lineman. Said he wanted hard-nosed, gritty, blah, 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 blah. He basically described the opposite of Laremy Tunsil. I think Washington, from their perspective, this is an excellent move. You've already established a culture in Washington, maybe further along than where the Texans are. They've gotten further in 1 year under Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels than the Texans ever have in their entire franchise history. So they have something going. They have Bobby Wagner. They have other guys. Laremy Tunsil's going to walk into the locker room. He's going to mind his business. He's going to handle his business. But here, it wasn't working. It was the worst offensive line in football. Worst offensive line in football. And I keep seeing, well, the offensive line got worse. How much worse can it get? How much worse can it get? What's going to happen? They're going to be the worst offensive line in football? This is a good move. And good for Laremy Tunsil. Not everyone's a one-on-one talent. Not everyone can move like that. And he's not going to change the way he moves. And this is going to be good for him. The other reality of this, and there's another side of this on top of all that. The other reality of this is that even if Laremy Tunsil were Swarm, and even if Laremy Tunsil were the perfect guy, they were going to have to say goodbye. We've been saying this. I've been saying this. I've been hammering this home. If you join me in this channel, you've heard me say this a number of times. Eventually, you're going to have to say goodbye to good football players. Do you think the Texans drafted Blake Fisher last year because they wanted a swing tackle? They didn't even know that Titus Howard was going to struggle heavily at right tackle. Hell, they thought he was still one of the better right tackles. You're going to have one of the highest paid corners, one of the highest paid quarterbacks, regardless of what happens, and one of the highest paid edge guys. Eventually, they were going to have to do this in a couple of years. They're going to have to make a decision, unless you want to say goodbye to Derek Stingley or figure out something with Will Anderson. This was going to happen. So there's a couple of things and a couple of reasons why this happens. Whether you agree with the culture thing and the ironing, sharpening iron thing or not, you don't have to agree with me. But there are two things that happen with this trade, regardless of how you feel or what you think. Number one is this is an this is an offensive line culture change. For better or worse, this is an offensive line culture change. However you want to take that, however you feel that is, it's an offensive line culture change. Is that a good thing? We'll see. But it's an offensive line culture change. And we'll get to the free agency. The free agency is way in the back. This is the most important thing, and I think it impacts everything else. But you have the offensive line culture change, and then you have the proactive economics, where you were going to have to do this eventually. Those are the two things. Proactive economics and an offensive line culture change. That's what it is. How will Laremy Tunsil be remembered? How will the Laremy Tunsil era be remembered? He's going to be remembered as a really good football player who had the organization by the balls from the jump. From the jump. You traded 2 first-round picks in a second. And you took back a guy who the Dolphins were probably going to release. You didn't negotiate the contract before, and he already had the leverage. He joked about that on the show when we had him on. Yeah, I had them by the balls. Then he just kind of goes about his business. As the culture shifts, the Texans are the laughingstock. There's the transition. And he becomes the, as he would say, 2-time highest paid offensive lineman of all time. Continues to have you by the balls. And I don't think Laremy Tunsil ever had to change the way that he moved. In part because he is so good. And also in part because he wasn't going to do that. A lot of the guys that you saw with Coley / Lovey, and then they moved over to DeMeco, very few. You kind of saw a little bit of a change. That's not Tunsil. He handles his business. But he was a hell of a football player. His teammates liked him. Just because it might not be beneficial for them to move like that doesn't mean they don't like him. It doesn't mean he's a malicious guy. He's not malicious at all. He's a likable guy. But from media obligations to practice, and there's some people who say he didn't practice very hard. People that know pretty well. But he was a solid player, and I think this is a win-win for both sides for a number of ways. And I think Washington, with the extra money they have, I think this is a good thing. I think Laremy might become the 3-time highest paid offensive lineman of all time. But I'm very, very proud of, not proud, but I have a lot more respect for DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio today than I did yesterday. And I already had a lot of respect for them because it was hard for me to listen and look at T-shirts that say iron sharpens iron. When the offensive, and swarm, when the offensive line wasn't swarm and I didn't see iron sharpening iron. It was hard for me to imagine. And they agreed. So Laremy Tunsil is no longer here.